So we'll give you another example on completing the square. And I would like to set this up as a way to do it. So here you have your, again, a, and we don't need the a, so we'll skip the a. X squared plus bx. So what we're missing is our c term to make this a perfect square. So I like to have this part there, and then under it I put this. So what can we fill in so far? Well, we know this is going to be x here, because x squared gives us our first term. And then this is going to be a minus now for a middle sign. Now for our b term, right now we have a -7. So we have to take half of that. Now half of a -7, just divided by 2, is a -2/2. So 7/2, I should say. So by seeing what's in our b term spot, we take half of that. Now, how do we get our c term? Our c term is this squared. So this is going to be 49/4. We have completed the square and factored it into a binomial that we're going to square. This is a perfect square trinomial. Okay. Now we're not finished yet, but we're on the way, so to speak. And there you have it. Now, when we use this as a piece of our solution to solve quadratic equations, we do so by this process of completing the square. And we will go through this process. Here it is written out step by step, but we'll show you in some detail. All right, let's take a look at this one. Again, take good notes. This is example 5. We want you to highlight and list this as problem A. So let me write it big over here. So we have x squared minus 8x. And over on this side we have a 25. So what we want to do is complete the square here. So this is sort of an easy one. So we put our parentheses. We know this is going to be an x here. This will give us our middle sign here. And what will this be here? Well, half of 8 is going to be 4. Now I'm going to change colors, because now we want our c term. So we square -4 and get a positive 16. Now, so far, before I put the 16 there, this was an equation. But once I put a 16 on this side, this is no longer an equation, because this side doesn't equal that side anymore. So to keep it equal, I have to add 16 to the other side. Ah, now it's an equation again. But when I factored this into this perfect square binomial that's a perfect square, from this perfect square trinomial, I get this. So this is going to be, let's see, how about 41 here? 6 and 5 is 11, yeah, 41. So now I have an equation. Now it's not the original equation anymore, but it's an equivalent equation. I've made this a perfect square trinomial by completing the square, and I kept it as an equation by Whatever I did to this side, I did to that side. So now look what I have. I have a binomial that's squared, that I can take the square root of this side now, and then I can take plus or minus the square root of that side. So now this just becomes the radicand. X minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 41. And I take over my negative 4 to this side. It becomes a positive 4. So I can take it off this side. And there's my solution. X will be 4 plus the square root of 41 and 4 minus the square root of 41. All right, they're completing the square. They've factored our perfect square trinomial into a binomial square. Now they're going to take the square root of both sides. Now what they're forgetting here is the plus or minus 41. I hope they put that there. Okay, they're just putting it in 2 steps. They separated it. That's fine. And we transpose the negative 4 in both cases. So we get 2 answers. The shortcut way is plus or minus 41. But really, they are 2 different answers. And they're saying, okay, good. They're saying this is how we write it. Now, this one's a little different now, because whenever we do completing the square, we want to have our A term as a 1. So as I look at this, I can take a 3 out of each term here. And I can do it this way or sidewards. So this now is x squared plus 2x minus 5 equals 0. And I check my work, and that looks good. Now, they want us to solve this by completing the square. So I'm going to put a parenthesis here. And this 5 seems out of place here. So what we do first in completing the square, when you have something like this, is take this c term here and move it to the other side of the equation as a positive 5. And I'm giving myself plenty of room. So it's gone from here, and again, this is still an equation, but I want to do this part and complete the square. So what I'll do, x I know goes here, a plus goes here, and I look at my b term, and I'm going to take half of my b term, which is 1. Now I can get my new c term here to make this a perfect square trinomial that will factor into this. Well, I square this and I get a 1. But now it's not an equation anymore, because I've added 1 here. To keep it an equation, I have to add 1 there. So this is going to be 1 plus 5 is 6. So with my magic eraser here, I'll make this side now a 6. So it was a 5. I added a 1 now to both sides. Now it's a 6. So I'm going to take the square root of this, and then plus or minus the square root of 6, and now I get x plus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 6. I transpose the 1. Now it becomes a negative 1 on this side, and these are my answers. Now remember, they said you could write it this way as shorthand, or you write it separately. All right, let's check it out here. Okay, so they're factoring it this way instead of on the side. Could do it either way. So the first thing you do is you take your -5, because this is not a perfect square trinomial. Move the 5 over to the other side as a +5. Then to make this a perfect square trinomial, we go through that special process. We had to square the 1 that's here, and that gives us a 1 that we add now to both sides. We factor that into its binomial square, take the square root of both sides, and there is our answer. Good job. Now, going on to example C here. It's in standard form. We want our A term to be a 1. So what we do is we divide each term by 2, and we get x squared now, plus x. And I'm going to take my -7/2 over to this side, where it becomes a +7/2. Once you clear to get an A as 1, you take your C term over to the other side. It changes its sign. Now I want to make a perfect square trinomial out of this. So the technique is we're going to use this. We know this is going to be an x. A plus is there. Now there's a 1 there that we don't write. What do we do to get our B term? Well, we multiply these two together and double it. So we have to take half of our B term here, and that is 1/2. All right, so that's not too bad. Now, to get our C term, our new C term here, we have to square this. So this is going to be 1/4. Now, this will factor into this, but it's not an equation anymore, because this 1/4 was added to this side, so we must add 1/4 to that side. And I'm going to do something right away to get this 7/2 to have a denominator of 4. So we have to add these together. Well, we're going to multiply it by 1 in the form of 2/2. So this is going to become 1/4 plus 14/4. Do you see that? What I've done? Brought it over, changed signs, completed the square, factored that, and now it's an equation, but I had to add these together. So this side is going to become 15/4. I don't know where I got that 1 in there from. Okay. 15/4. Sorry about that. So there's where we are. Now, what do I do? Well, I'm going to take the square root of this side, and then plus or minus the square root of that side. So this then becomes x plus 1/2 equals plus or minus. Now, notice I can take the square root of 4 over here, and that's going to be 2. But my numerator will be the square root of 15, and then this will just be over 2. So I'm simplifying that a little bit. And then I take my plus x over to this side, or it becomes a negative, plus 1/2 I meant to say, a negative 1/2. And I'll use my eraser, as you've seen the process here. Now, this is a good answer, but here they tend to want to have, since it's over 2, it'll be like a negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 15 all over 2, like so. And there's my solution. So, again, the nice thing about these is you can go back and play it again, Sam, or whatever. Let's check it out. Okay, they're not showing us an awful lot here, are they? I think I included a few more steps, which would be helpful. But they are taking our negative 7/2 over to the other side. Now, they're completing the square without showing us the process. So our C term now, over here we're adding 1/4 to both sides, and we have to add these together. And there's where we get our 15/4, and there is the binomial that we're going to square. Again, I think I like my illustration a little bit better. I'm showing much more detail. And then we take the square root of both sides, and they're saying you can put it all over 8/2. Okay. Now, we have perhaps enough time to do this one. Keep this 20 minutes, too, so let's do it. So our A term is this. This is good. So we're going to have x squared minus 2x. Now we're going to bring our C term over here as a negative 13. That's what we do in this process of completing the square. We put our parenthesis, and we want to find out what will our new C term be. Well, our x goes here, the negative sign goes here. We now take half of b, which is 1. We square the 1, which gives us a positive 1. We now have a perfect square trinomial, but it's not an equation anymore because we added 1 to this side, so we must add 1 to that side. So this side now will become a negative 12. So I take the square root of this, and I get x minus 1 equals, and I'm taking plus or minus, funny kind of minus there, this. I'm going to do this here. So plus or minus the square root of negative 12, which is going to be I, the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. The square root of 4 is 2, so this is going to become 2i, the square root of 3, plus or minus, and I'm going to bring this negative 1 over as a positive 1, and I'm going to use my eraser here, and there's our answer. So again, when you end up with a negative under a radical, this is not a real number. And again, we may have skipped that chapter. I think that was in chapter 11 that we didn't cover, where they introduce imaginary numbers. So we're doing a little bit of it. And I will check with our director to see how much is to be included. Okay, let's take a look at what they have as we approach the 20 minutes. And there we got to this stage. We take the square root of both sides, and they took out the I, and then that's the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Square root of 4 is 2, and then they bring over the 1, and there are your answers. Okay, so just at 20 minutes. We'll pick up shortly.